Welcome to episode 117 of I Thought I Knew How, a podcast about knitting and life and all sorts. I'm your host, Anne Frost, and this episode was recorded on June 12th, 2024. I'm keeping up with this once-a-month trend we have going. I have an interview today for you with a knit and crochet designer named Julia Madill, who has a brilliant new book for crocheters coming out soon. Along the way, she shares a bit of her experience working as a designer. Let's get going so we can get to it. It's been a busy month here in Anne land. Lots of family birthdays and celebrations from mid-May until the start of June. I am officially 48 years old, which is unbelievable, though my gray hair suggests otherwise. The whole family has been home this summer and it's been lovely. My youngest is working as my assistant this summer, which is frankly why I have the time to be recording this episode. So thanks to her for that. She has been helping with some event planning tasks and paperwork and social media, including getting me on TikTok. So if anyone is over there, give us a follow as I thought I knew how. Basically, anything that I haven't wanted to throw myself into full-heartedly, but needs doing, has been passed along to her, which is making me very happy and is making her earn her pay. Another benefit to having her help is that it's freed me up enough to go to some local knit nights again after literally 2 years of missing out, and it's been so nice to see everyone again. If you don't have a local knit night, start one because Fiber Friends are the best. Creatively, I have been working on getting as many projects finished up as I can. The unfinished object situation is ridiculous, and I'm going back to Shetland next month for a sheep to sweater tour with Mac Our Way Through Shetland. We will be doing all the steps from watching someone shear to planning colors and patterns and learning about proportions with our designs. And then we will cast on and have some follow-up sessions online with Allison Rendell, who's helping us with the actual designing bit while we're there. I'm really excited to get there and get going with it, but the thought of having a full Fair Isle jumper on the needles is making me feel like I need to get some of these lingering projects done and out of the way. Unfortunately, none of them are at that mindless knitting stage, which is what I have the most time for these days. So what it has meant is that I have cast on a few easy and quick knits for those moments when I've been watching a movie at the theater, or I've had a bunch of reading to do that didn't necessarily need to be highlighted or have notes taken. I just cannot sit still anymore unless my hands are working on something. My mind just will not focus. So the UFO pile keeps getting bigger, or at least just sort of sitting how it is, and I'm cranking out dishcloths and easy cowls and things like that. But I really need to get to those projects. I do have some plans in the works for additional episodes through the summer, and thanks to having that assistant, I hope that those will come out on a semi-regular basis over the next couple of months. Today, as I said, I'm bringing you an interview with Julia Madill, who is a knitting and crochet designer based in Canada. She's been an in-house designer for a major yarn company and has had her work published in Pom Pom and at crochet.com, as well as designing for Vicky Howell's Yarn Yay boxes and elsewhere. You can find her website at juliamadill.com to see her portfolio, and all her links will of course be in the show notes. Julia was working on a project one day and realized there was a book missing in the marketplace and decided she needed to fill that need. Her book, Every Way with Granny Crochet, 50 Shapes in Classic Granny Stitch, is available now for pre-order and will be released on September 3rd. I was very lucky to get an advance copy, and it is going to be a brilliant addition to every crocheter's shelf. Crochet is so hot right now. The young people, listen to me. Younger crafters, does that make me sound not quite so old? The young people. Younger crafters have really taken up crochet, and if you have not added it to your repertoire yet, I'm going to shake my cane at you and say it is time. Please enjoy this chat with designer and author Julia Madill. Thank you, Julia, for coming on the show today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I just would love if you would share with us how you got started in fiber crafts.
I'm sure you've heard this a lot. My mom taught me how to knit and crochet, I think, when I was little, and didn't stick with it, didn't have the patience for it as a kid. I have like a vague memory of some yellow plastic needles and red yarn and having to get her to fix my dropped stitches all the time. But it wasn't really until the Debbie Stoller Stitch and Bitch book came out around 2000, I think. Mm-hmm. And I was, I guess, in my early 20s at the time. And it kind of coincided with the new internet world of knitting. And it was just like a perfect storm where suddenly I saw this new, fresh, young, of course, that's like 25 years ago now, right? version of knitting that really appealed to me. And I had always had this sort of artsy, crafty background. And I just kind of went bonkers for knitting at that time. I started like obsessively reading knitting blogs. And then lo and behold, like there was this whole knitting community in Toronto that I was unaware of that was just down the street from me. Let Us Knit, which was the yarn store closest to me, had a knit night, and Amy Singer from Knitty magazine went to that knit night, and the Yarn Harlot, Stephanie Pearl McPhee, went to that knit night. It was just like, what? All of these people are just down the street? Yeah, so I kind of dove in head first as a hobby. And then a few years later, I was working as an illustrator and animator for television, and realized it wasn't, I needed to change things up. I wasn't passionate about it. So I left, and while I was trying to figure things out, I got a job at a yarn store just to sort of, have a trickle of income while I was figuring out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And through there, I got a contact that another former employee had recently got a job at a yarn company here and said that they needed like a junior designer. I applied and I got in, and I spent a really long time, 13 years, I think, working at a yarn company as an in-house designer. So pretty cool that I was able to take my hobby and just sort of by fluke, this came up, I like followed my heart, I guess, and it led me in the right place. So I worked there for 13 years, I think. And then just a couple of years ago, I left, and now I freelance in the same capacity. So I'm a designer now, and I tech edit and do stitch charts and all of the tertiary stuff that is involved with knit and crochet design.
That's a remarkable path. And what an amazing series of things coming together to have all of that happen. I know there's going to be quite a few listeners who were part of that early 2000 Stitch and Bitch sort of resurgence of knitting who can identify with that. But then to have the editor of Knitty and Stephanie Pearl McPhee as part of your local knit community, that must have just felt like you were in the middle of it.
Yeah, it was weird. Like at first I found out like, oh, it's Canadian. And like, oh, it's like Amy lives in Toronto. And then she's 2 blocks away. Like it was very weird. I'm not a very woo-woo kind of person, but it did kind of feel like the universe was trying to tell me something. Yeah. Like, this is the way to go.
In your position as an in-house designer for a yarn company, what did that entail? How would your days look when you were in that position?
It really morphed over the course of the time that I was there, primarily because the company just kept growing and getting bigger and changing. So part of my day was always designing. And if you're working for a yarn company, it's very different than freelancing or designing on your own, because you're trying to sell a product. Like the yarn is what's being sold, not the pattern. So it was designing with parameters. Either you have to use a specific yarn, or perhaps it's like a trend that they want to hit, or it has to be all home decor, or it has to be all crochet or something like that. But I actually quite like designing with some parameters. Like I like puzzles. I like creative problem solving, and I think it scratches an itch. I mean, it wasn't always that easy. Sometimes I had to make some things that were tough, to like putting a square peg in a round hole. But yeah, part of my day was always design related, but I worked pretty closely with the marketing department and product development. Near the end, I was probably going to have to choose between the design department or product development. And I mean, like, all of it interested me. So it was hard sometimes to divide my attention. But I mean, as for the design part, it's pretty rare that a yarn company will have an in-house design team. I don't think there's a lot of them out there. And the other big difference between sort of designing freelance or for yourself for other publications is I would write the patterns. The design team would write the patterns, but not knit them. You would write a sweater and grade it all and have it completely done, send it to a tech editor, and then send it to a sample knitter. So you really had to know your technique, the math of it all, and like cross your fingers that it was going to come back looking the way you intended it to.
That's amazing. I know when I think about what a designer does, and the few times I've designed something, it's been writing things down as I do it, as opposed to writing it all out and then testing it all at once. So that's incredible. Did you ever have any true disasters, shall we say, as a result?
I was thinking about that recently. I don't think there was ever anything that like was absolutely unusable. And also it's made once, usually before a photo shoot, and sometimes things would be corrected after the fact. But yeah, definitely some things that came back weird, but nothing I couldn't fix. So and also the nice thing about working there was working as a team. So, when I started, I had sort of dabbled in designing, but I was able to learn from people who had an enormous amount of experience and were willing to share that with me. So I had people to bounce ideas off of. They could prevent those disasters from happening. But it's really interesting sometimes to see like things come back. Maybe if something was made more than once, and you'd see the difference between two different knitters or two different crocheters. Somebody didn't get the pattern gauge, and then something comes back and it's like, how did they not notice that this is 6 inches bigger than it's supposed to be?
Sometimes denial is really strong when you haven't done that gauge swatch. You just think, it'll be fine. It'll be fine.
Yeah. And I can see if you're a sample knitter on a tight deadline sometimes and just be like, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's due tomorrow.
So I know that designing for the yarn company wasn't your only design outlet. You've designed for other publications, and I know that you have worked with Vicki Howell in the past, and you can find your stuff on crochet.com. I should mention that you designed for both Crochet and Knit. So you've published, say, in Pom Pom magazine. Was that something where you saw the call and thought, I have an idea that would work for that, and then you went for it? Or did they approach you? Or like, how did these other projects happen for you?
I mean, they're all a little bit different, but for the most part, I've been answering design submission calls like anyone else would. And that's quite a bit different than working for a yarn company, or at least the one I work for, in that I did so much volume at the yarn company. And I wasn't making my own samples. So I'm not a very fast knitter or crocheter, to be honest. So there's no way I could put out that kind of volume of pattern on my own. But at the same time, working as a team and working for the same company where they trust that you can design and that you're going to fulfill what you've promised, I never had to create really in-depth pattern proposals. It was like, oh, we're going to do, and speaking shorthand to other designers as well. So it's like, oh, Julia's going to do a vest. It'll be like a garter stitch with ribbing a V-neck, like stripes. Yeah, it'll be nice. And then off I go, right? Whereas for a publication, maybe if you're at a certain level, you can kind of take some shortcuts or something, but they expect a very well thought out and planned design. So that was something that was really interesting to start doing, is like really putting my idea on paper and solidifying it, because I was used to having a little bit of leeway where if like, I've got this idea, but I haven't completely nailed down all the details, so I can kind of like shift things as I go along. But for most publications, I mean, rightly so, they want to know that you've really thought this out and that you can deliver, because they're taking a chance on you as a designer, and they probably don't have a plan B. Like if your design doesn't work out, they're going to have to really scramble. So yeah, doing really nice, neat sketches and nice swatches and photographing it's been a whole other exercise. I mean, honestly, that's probably the first part of the design process anyway, is nailing all that down and swatching. It's just I've been pulling that part of the design process forward before I even approach anyone. But as far as writing, I guess I am a little less rigid. I do still strive to write the whole pattern before knitting or crocheting it. It's what I've been doing for so long. And then I know that the math is, the logic of it all is going to work out because I've thought it through from beginning to end. And I find I make mistakes if I'm relying on just working and then making some notes. Like I think there's more margin for error there. Mm-hmm. I'd rather have it all on paper and then relax and make the thing, and then make notes as I'm knitting or crocheting that, oh, this didn't work out, or I want to change this here, et cetera, et cetera.
I will say you do have a very distinctive style. Both your knit and crochet pieces, a lot of them, I feel like after looking through your website and your Ravelry and things like that, I see clear shapes, bold colors, interesting use of negative space with some of your crochet pieces. Do you think that that's something that comes from your design and illustration background? Is that just clothes you want to wear?
I think it's all of the above, for sure. I really love bright color and clean, bold patterns. And I like that in all aspects of my life, like home decor, clothes, everything. And I really like 60s and 70s kind of retro stuff, which tends to be really bold and bright and borderline gaudy. That's my pocket. So definitely I'm not interested in designing complex things. The design that really appeals to me is clever, not difficult, if you know what I mean. I'm not saying all my designs are clever, but the kind of things I want to design are also the kind of things that I want to knit or crochet. And that's that somebody else has figured out and done a lot of research to be able to simplify and distill something so that it's fun, and maybe there's just a little twist, a little design detail, a little finishing thing that makes it takes it over the edge and makes something really attractive. Like the Sophie scarf that everyone has been knitting the last few years. I mean, it's a garter stitch triangle. It's super simple, but I didn't write it. Somebody else didn't write it. Somebody put that out there and thought, okay, what if you put this nice edging on it, and thought it through. And of course, it's the kind of thing people want to knit because it's fun, and somebody has done that work for you, and
right.
You don't have to think too hard, and you get this nice refined result.
Is there a pattern that you've done that you're particularly proud of in that regard? Pick your favorite baby, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, and there's so many. I mean, I spent 13 years. I think I did the math once. If I wrote about 2 patterns a week for 13 years, it's like there's ones I've completely forgotten about.
Yeah.
But usually the ones that were more difficult for me or pushed me out of my comfort zone were always the most satisfying. Like pretty much any garment I did, I have been pretty proud of because I was also grading them. And there's like a super simple garter stitch short row shawl I did for Yarnspirations that just, it's a graphic design exercise. It was like color changing yarn where there's 5 colors per ball of yarn, and then engineering it so that you make a short row triangle and you have just enough yarn in that color before it changes, and then you make another triangle that becomes a square, like all that kind of stuff. I love it. It's a puzzle. It's
yeah. Okay. And you said this earlier too, it's more interesting to design when you have some sort of parameter to solve for. So with the color changing yarn, you have to do something where the pattern's going to work with that certain length, how to make that work. Sometimes complete free reign can be deadly for creativity because there's just so many places to go.
Yeah, like if you gave me a sweater's worth of like red yarn and said make a sweater, I'm like, ugh, I would have 8,000 ideas and I wouldn't know how to narrow it down.
Yeah, exactly. I have you here because I wanted to talk to you about this incredible concept for a book that you came up with that's coming out on September 4th. And it's called Every Way to Granny Crochet, 50 Shapes in Classic Granny Stitch. Well, first, I just want to give you the opportunity to tell us where the idea came to create this book and sort of the process that you went through to get it done.
First of all, I had no grand plan to write a book, but I was making a granny square vest and just making it up as I went along. And most granny square garments are the most common ones you see out there, are made from squares and then triangles, like a square cut in half triangle. And I wanted to make a deeper V-neck with more refined shaping that I could get with those 2 shapes. But I didn't want to break the pattern. So I came up with this shape that in the book I call the boot, which is kind of like a rectangle with a little triangle at the bottom. And it worked really well. And I was very pleased with myself. And I was sewing my new boot into my granny square vest. And I remember as I was doing it, I was thinking, I got to look out for a stitch dictionary that collects all of the different shapes you can make with the granny stitch, because I know I had seen like granny hexagons and granny circles, and I just assumed that this book existed. And I started looking for it and I couldn't find it. And the more I looked, I just had this sinking feeling like, oh crap, I have to write this book. It was not crap because I didn't want to do it. It's just like, oh, this is an opportunity that I have to seize this or let it go by and then get angry when somebody else finally moves into this hole in the market. So, and that coincided with when I left the yarn company, so I would have the time to do it. And yeah, I thought like, is there even enough there to create a book? And I started like thinking of all the different shapes that you could probably make. And I actually initially had a list of 75. And
so there's room for a sequel, is what you're saying.
Yeah, maybe. And then I had to go like, well, okay, how do you write a book? Like I've written patterns. I knew that I had the skills to write the material, but how to go about getting a publisher to put out your book and everything else. I mean, I've really been just learning that as I go, and it's been a really fun challenge. So I literally bought a book called How to Write a Book Proposal. I followed it to a T. And luckily, I was able to find a publisher quite easily. And
well, I think your timing is excellent. I feel like just sort of observationally, crochet is going through something similar to what knitting went through in the early 2000s, where thanks to the internet, the younger generation is sort of finding it to be a soothing activity that they can learn and do quickly and benefit from and enjoy. And, I have daughters in sort of that 20-year-old range, and they're doing it and their friends are doing it. And there's this big interest in amigurumi and grannies.
I was really hoping, like, putting the book proposal together, I was like, oh, I hope this just isn't a flash in the pan trend.
Right.
Like, by the time, because it takes a long time to write
Yeah.
a book and for a publisher to put it together. Like, this whole process has been about 2 years, and that's more than enough time for a trend to die. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that it just seems to be gaining more momentum. But
Yeah.
I agree. I do find that crochet in particular seems to be appealing to the TikTok generation, if you want to call it that. I haven't thought too much about why, but I guess it's, a fashion trend that's actually easily achievable, whereas maybe a complex cabled sweater or something, like, that's not a beginner project that you can achieve easily. A beginner can make a granny square cardigan probably without a lot of practice. I did a lot of thinking before I wrote this book about, like, why is the granny square so popular? Why is it stood the test of time? And why is it the one motif that keeps coming back? And I think a lot of it is it's the speed, it's the customization, it's a one round repeat. Once you've got it established, you can make it look so different just with changing up the yarn, changing up the colors. And it's 2 stitches, really. It's a chain and a double crochet.
Yeah.
That's all you need to learn. And you also don't even have to work into stitches. You're working into spaces, which I think for a beginner or anybody is so much easier. I mean, you've got that big hole, just jam your hook in there. You don't have to pay too much attention. Like, that's what I really wanted to apply to the other shapes in the book, because, most of this information is not entirely new. I didn't make up, a granny hexagon, but what I did try to do is give people the information to not just make a hexagon that's 6 rounds and that's it. I wanted, wherever I could, to provide the repeat, so that just like the granny square, you can make it 2 rounds or you can make it 100 rounds and just keep going.
Yeah. And even I was showing you before the little triangle that's in your book that I made. And you even had a note on the page that was, if you join 6 of those together in a circle, then you have a hexagon, and then you can go from there. I was like, oh yeah, you do. I wouldn't.
Yeah, I wish I would have, like,
These other little variations.
I think as I, embark on my book promotion journey, that's what I'll be exploring. Like, because I was so focused on getting these shapes right that now I want to play around with them and see which ones fit together and all the different patterns you can make. And that's really fun. That's back to graphic design. And I love pulling things into Illustrator. Adobe Illustrator is like that's my jam. I like planning knit and crochet projects in there and just switching up the colors and being able to see immediately what changes, just color will make.
And we should say, this isn't just a stitch dictionary. You do have a project at the back for people that uses 15 of the granny squares that you have worked that out, where, you have 15 different squares that you can put together into a sampler. Just to go through the list here. So you have, just looking at the square, talking about customization, you have 10. There's 10 variations of just squares. So when you say, it's customizable, there's variation there. I mean, just for a square, there's 10 different versions. And then you have a section on triangles. You have a section on rounded shapes that includes things like flowers and an egg that can also be an avocado and teardrop. And then it tickled my nostalgia nerve, the ornament that looks like the sort of classic 60s style Christmas ornament. And then you have different other geometric shapes like the diamonds and hexagons and things like that, and stars and rectangles. And within each of those, there's a whole number of variations available to play with. I know you said that you didn't sort of invent them, but how did you gather? Are there any that you did invent? And how did you go about sort of gathering and pulling all of these together?
A lot of it was like going through what's already out there, books and blogs and what have you. And when it came to the more popular shapes, like hexagons or the circle. There was a lot of it out there, but I wanted to find, okay, what's the best one? What's the best formula? Which one can I find the easiest repeat to put in there? I'm not going to claim, like, I wouldn't make the grand claim that I invented these and wrote these. Some of them I did, but something like the circle, in the end, like the circle was honestly, that was my white whale. That was like trying to get the perfect granny circle. And I really wanted to find that repeat so that people could make a tiny circle and then also make like a giant blanket or tablecloth or whatever. And in the end, I kind of had to compromise because I think the math just doesn't work. I'm not a real mathematician kind of designer. And I know that circles involve pi and it's like much more complex mathematics than my brain can handle. And then you've got the like 4-stitch repeat of the typical granny stitch. It just didn't work. In the end, what I made a compromise where I have it spelled out to, I think it's 13 or 18 rounds, something like that. And I give you guidelines for how to keep going. But I think the repeat would have ended up being like, I don't know, 20 rounds or something like that. I don't know. It was like an unwieldy repeat, but I'm super pleased with how it turned out because from round 1 to round 5, each round is like a nice round circle. It looks great. Yeah. Whereas some of them get a little wonky after a while, like this lays flat. You can make it any size. It's still going to be a nice flat round circle. I don't know if that answered your question. I got off on a circle tangent, but
that's okay, because it sort of leads me into another aspect of the book that I really enjoyed, which was, and this might sound weird to say, but the tone in which it's written.
Okay.
I really enjoyed, because I find some books are very technical and they're just sort of straightforward. The pattern, here's your pattern. And some of them are trying to be cool. Like, come on, kids, isn't this great? And they'll throw in a couple slang and you're just like, oh, who wrote this? Yeah. But reading the book and even reading through some of the patterns, it feels like having someone there who knows what they're doing and is just telling you how to do it. And I would say, like, the patterns are still written in technical crochet language, but it's the language around them that is very just like, okay, here's how you do a chain. Here's how we're going to work this. And oh, by the way, and then you'll have like a little thing off to the side that's sort of like a little tip, or it feels kind of like, you're getting instruction at your local fiber club from a friend and something's occurred to you, oh, you should know this too. And it's like a good little bit of information, or a good, like, keep this in mind, or you may want to try this kind of tip that's there as well. It's just a comfortable read, it's just a comfortable stitch dictionary. It's well done.
I praise. Thank you so much, because that's exactly what I was going for. I mean, I know that I'm essentially writing a textbook. Like, this can be very dry, but part of my personality, I love jokes and puns and colorful everything. And I wanted it to be sort of conversational. But yeah, it always, like, it just makes my eyes roll when things get a little too cheeky, and I don't want it to be dated, but I wanted to be able to get my puns in there. So I was really trying to strike a balance between informational and conversational, and also kind of reflect my personality a bit. So I'm glad you picked up on that. I achieved my goal, I guess.
I love the puns too, by the way. So how do you hope that people are going to use this book?
I hope they make their own designs. I hope they use it as a springboard. I mean, I have found over the past 20 some odd years that I've been living and working in the yarn world, I buy fewer and fewer books. And the books I do buy are stitch dictionaries and technique books. So I hope this is one that people will add to their library and reference when, oh, I need to make a baby blanket. Maybe I'll do something a little different and I'll make it with octagons and squares instead of just granny squares. Yeah, I really hope people are inspired by this to make their own things, because that's what stitch dictionaries are all about. They're inspiration and reference.
Absolutely.
I initially wasn't going to include any patterns at all, but my publisher encouraged putting something in there. And I was really nervous. Also, I want this book to have longevity, so I don't want to put a cardigan or something like that in there that's going to look dated. So the sampler blanket was my answer to that. And I think you can also break up that sampler blanket into sections. Like there's little sort of 10-inch square sections that you could just repeat that and make.
Well, and I think the inclusion of the sampler blanket also is proof to people that these can be combined in fun and interesting ways. So have a play, see what you come up with. Even if they don't make that exact sampler blanket, it's a way to say, see what you can do. So how can people order this book? Because it's not out yet. It's going to, let's see, this episode will probably come out sort of mid-June, and the book's not coming out till the start of September. So how can people order who are excited at this moment in time?
It's up for pre-order on Amazon right now. So it's available for pre-order on Amazon.
Yeah. Is this one that will be available eventually in local yarn stores, or should people look for it at like a Joann's, Michael's, big box stores? Do you know where it's going to land?
It should be available in most yarn stores. It just depends on distribution, because it's a British publisher. They do a lot of craft books, so it should be out there.
Do you have any other projects coming up that people should be aware of other than the book?
Nothing I can talk about yet. I have a lot of things in early production, and I will be looking to be teaching classes and going to fiber events and such. The only thing that's confirmed so far is I'll be at Rhinebeck at the New York Sheep and Wool Festival. I'll be in the authors area, wherever it's called. I'll be there on this Saturday. You can just check out juliamadill.com, my website, and I'll keep putting anything new up there, or on Instagram, and I'm Julia Madill everywhere.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Julia, for taking the time to talk with me today.
Thank you.
Again, thank you, Julia, for creating such a needed book and for taking the time to talk about it for my listeners. Folks, go order that book now. Pre-orders are so helpful to authors. It helps with their positioning in the charts when the book releases, and it helps the publisher know that there is a demand for the book so they can have the right number printed and ready to go at launch. If you crochet, or if you are Granny Square curious, this is going to be a book you will use again and again. A few more things before I go. Stitch and Pitch is just over 2 months away, but I would not delay in getting your tickets because the stadium is already getting close to selling out for that date, and I will not be able to get more tickets. Regular tickets to the August 17th game at Dunkin' Donuts Park in Hartford for Stitch and Pitch include your seat, a $2 credit for stadium concessions, an entry for one of 9 inning prizes contributed by local yarn stores such as the Yarn Barn, UNU Fiber Arts, and Knit New Haven. Those tickets mainly exist for those bringing a non-crafter to the event, because I know most of you listening are going to want to opt for the premium ticket, which comes with all of the stuff a regular ticket comes with, plus a cotton tote swag bag filled with items from the event sponsors: Uradale Yarns, Hilly Knits, Clover USA, Knit Pro, and Unicorn Clean, and of course this podcast. Get all the details and order your tickets at ithoughtIknewhow.com/stitchandpitch. Side note, we were at a game just last night and it was brilliant. We had like 4 innings of not a whole lot going on. I was getting a lot of knitting done. And then the visiting team scored 3 runs over the following 2 innings. And long story short, we went into the 9th inning down by 2 runs, and the Yard Goats decided to sub in a different hitter who was a lefty, and the other team immediately timed out. They went up, they had a big conference on the pitcher's mound. I think they were trying to tell the pitcher, we're going to swap you out because this guy's a lefty, and they decided not to. Next pitch, the guy they subbed in hit a home run, brought his run and another run in, and the Yard Goats won the game. It was incredible. People lost their minds. It was great. It was like one of those brilliant baseball moments. So come along. I can't guarantee there's going to be a brilliant baseball moment, but it's going to be a brilliant time. So I thought I knew how.com/stitch and pitch. To further entice you to come to Hartford, the I-91 Shop Hop is coming up this summer and will run August 6th through the 17th, meaning you could come spend 4 or 5 days driving around the beautiful New England countryside, visiting some of the best yarn shops in the country, and finish up with an evening at the ballpark on the last day. This year, there's a total of 13 shops involved, from Lebanon, New Hampshire, all the way down to the Connecticut coast. People travel to New England in the fall for the colors, but my favorite time of year is and always has been the summer. The I-91 Shop Hop includes the Appalachian foothills, the farmlands of western Massachusetts and Connecticut, and the New England shore, passing through cities that are home to the Basketball Hall of Fame, museums dedicated to children's book authors Dr. Seuss and Eric Carle, American history sites, the homes of Mark Twain and Harriet Beecher Stowe, and top quality museums and theaters in Springfield, Hartford, and New Haven. Each shop along the hop has daily drawings, and 3 major prizes at the end will be awarded to 3 people who visit all 13 shops. Typically, I've done the whole event in 3 days, but I think to be safe this year, I'm going to plan to do it in 4. But if you're planning to come and see more of what New England has to offer, plan on at least a week. Grab your fiber besties, book a few hotel stays along the route. You won't regret it. You can pick up your event bag and passport at the first shop you visit. I'll include a link to information in the show notes. If you're looking to plan something for next year, the 2025 Macking Our Way Through Shetland tours are open for booking. Jolene Island Vista is hosting 4 weeks of tours next year, and spaces are filling up. There's 1 Fair Isle tour in May, and then 3 weeks of tours back-to-back in July into August to do contemporary crafts, Fair Isle, and lace. I love every single one of the tours on offer, as do the participants, many of whom opt to try a second tour that they're kind of iffy about. And then they end up loving that tour more than they originally planned on because it is fun to learn new things. Visit islandvista.co.uk and click on the link to Wool Tours to learn more. Right, I am off. I should be back in a few weeks if all works with my summer plans. In the meantime, thank you for listening and knitting with me for a bit. If you enjoy the show, please rate and review the show in the app you use to download it. And I'd love it if you'd share the episode with a friend. The show notes are where you will find links to the things mentioned in the show, so be sure to check those out. Find me on my social media accounts as I Thought I Knew How, except on X, aka Twitter, where it's just Thought I Knew How. The groups on various platforms are all called I Thought I Knew How Podcast. Until next time, may you be blessed with stitches that never drop, yarn without joins, and plenty of time to knit.